suffer from addiction, but also for the entire Commonwealth's well-being, economically and otherwise. Addiction plays a huge toll not only on individuals, but families and the community. And so it's in that vein that I bring House Bill 271 to the committee and ask for committee's support. What we're trying to do, and it's I guess a kind of a novel idea or creative approach to recognize the very valuable contribution that individuals like John and Centers for Support Recovery Services make to the community and to the individuals that are suffering from addiction. We spent a lot of time over the last several months trying to divine a way that we can bring parity to this field between what the public provides in terms of more clinical services where everyone's treated like a patient, to where the public, the nonprofit community, and the private sector is able to also provide services that have, I think, tremendous efficacy, and frankly, do so at a much lower cost. I'm not here to debate whether one is good or bad, or we should wholesale substitute. What I'm trying to establish in this conversation is that there is a need for parity and recognition of what the private and nonprofit sectors provide in terms of recovery support services. So, to make a long story short, to that end, what we've done is to try to create a grant program where it would support the activities of recovery support services organizations throughout the Commonwealth. You see that in lines 53 on, creating a new section dealing with that grant program established, and then create a competitive bidding process within that program so that we have accountability and we know how every dollar spent, who's qualified, criteria that is necessary to ensure all of those things. And do so in a collaborative way where you see in 86 there'd be a working group of stakeholders that would convene, and then the accountability piece as well, further beyond the RFP, that the department would report to the governor and the General Assembly regarding the grants that have been made. So we understand that as we establish this parity that is working. You may ask about the money. We want things to be efficient and effective, obviously, this year and every year, regardless of the subject matter, but in particular in this area. And so we're proposing, I think Sarah could elaborate if we have particular technical questions, but that we would perform an audit, and any monies derived from that audit would roll to fund the grant program. So if it doesn't have money, it's not going to work. But this is the best way that we could determine to help get something up and running, considering this economic climate, while recognizing the very value that the nonprofit, private sector, support services communities provide those suffering from addiction, their families and communities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have John Shinholzer here, who's with the McShin Foundation here locally. He's doing a lot of great work in Central Virginia, across the Commonwealth. I'm happy to take questions, and I know that he would like to also address the committee on the concept that we have before you.
Delegate Peace, you had given me a summary before we started, so I know a little more than everybody else. Could you take a step back and give everybody a bigger picture? I think that there's probably some puzzle. Some people are not quite sure what you're talking about. So you maybe take a step back and say, what is this all about? What are you trying to do? And then,
well, I tried, Mr. Chairman, I tried to address that somewhat from a macro level.
More macro.
More macro. I think John actually will be a better person to address that, since he's in the field and he can see the disparity.
We provide substance abuse services in the Commonwealth.
Correct.
Okay. To whom is this directed? There's people facing criminal charges. There's people who just walk in and seek help. What is this general topic about?
This is trying to address those in our communities that are suffering from addiction, that are trying to be rehabilitated so that they can become more contributing members of our community. I'm not sure, John, if you actually have people who've been through the criminal justice system.
We do. Because as well as.
And so these are services typically delivered through the CSB, Community Services Board.
Right.
And right now, there are government employees who do the counseling, whether it be group or solo.
That's correct, and John can address this too. I think that there's been some, I think there's a need for, and back up here in my thoughts. You know, in our full committee just a little bit ago, we talked about how we are moving in a different direction in terms of healthcare. That we're moving towards these more collaborative team type approaches. That, you know, not everything should be done in an environment where you know, we're simply treating people as patients. There is a clinical cure for them. I know the governor's been very supportive of the Healing Place here in Richmond that provides support services and other places where you have peer-to-peer contact. You have people who have had issues with substance abuse, who overcome those challenges, and they're able through that mentoring to help people who also have the same issues or struggling through the same problems. So I think what we're trying to say is there's a big picture here. There are a lot of ways to skin the cat. There are a lot of ways that we can address addiction in the Commonwealth. Right now, the government services seem to only be focused in one area. We want to sort of allow the private and non-profit sectors to provide their expertise and help people as well.
Mr. Chair, Delegate Peace. So as I understand what we're trying to do here, basically you're creating a grant program in order to allow localities to apply for grants to fund private sector substance abuse recovery services. Am I right so far?
Recovery support.
Recovery support service, okay. And then the funding, the essential funding mechanism for this grant fund, it's got the language where, you know, we can appropriate money if we want to, you can accept contributions if you want to, but essentially your main funding source that you've identified is you want the department to audit existing government-run programs, identify savings, and then channel those savings into the grant program.
That's correct.
So the question that I have, now that I understand what we're trying to do, I don't see the language in what is before me that relates to the audit and the funding mechanism.
I have page 2, lines 95 to the end. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. It's a second enactment clause that deals with the auditor of public accounts and how it should be administered and the considerations it should take related to improving efficiency and effectiveness and implementing cost-saving measures in the delivery of public substance abuse prevention and treatment services. And then goes on, there are a couple of stipulations related to the report that would be issued to the governor and the General Assembly. We want to know whether this is, you know, working. I guess you could think of this as a pilot, but it's not really a pilot, okay, Mr. Chairman, if that helps anyone's thought process.
So, further questions, Mr. Chairman?
Delegate Andy Crockett.
So presumably, the government entities currently being funded for this, you know, they have some pot of money, and we identify efficiencies, and we're going to take away some of their pot of money based on those identified efficiencies and put it into this grant program. Have folks expressed any opposition to this idea because they think they're going to lose money?
Mr. Chairman, I answer the delegate by saying I had a brief conversation with the CSBs. They have raised some questions about you know, why this is needed, but I think that those questions really highlight this disparity issue, which is where the government-run services seem to be the only answer, and we're saying that there's a bigger picture. And John, I think, can speak a lot to what he's been able to do and succeed with in his nonprofit, and there are many others across the Commonwealth. Yeah, I bring this bill not to disparage what the CSBs are doing, because they certainly provide critical care and support to people in need. I bring this bill because I believe in the work that the nonprofits are doing that I think think we all support, because one size doesn't fit all. And there are people out there that are struggling that do better in different environments. And I think the government has a role in trying to shape itself and its practices in the way that would best serve the needs of the community.
Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Peace.
Delegate Peace.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, let me make sure I understand this. We're taking money away from, like, the community service boards if we find deficiencies. You know, 10 or 12 years ago, we started this process of closing institutions and putting people back for communities. And we, at that time, told the community service board that they would be responsible for helping these people get into the community, stay within their community, and have a quality of life. And I feared then, and I was a member of the community service board, and I fear now that we're going to take away the funding community service boards need to help these people. Because we are closing institutions and because things are happening like that, does not mean the need for services of these people go away and disappear. I have a real problem with defunding community service boards to any other level. At this point, I can't see me supporting this change. I would have to study this more, and I do appreciate the fact that we just got this recovery and management. But at this point, I'll have to honestly tell you, I can't support this.
Mr. Chairman, may I dialogue with the delegate? Mr. Chairman, Delegate Peace. I heard exactly what you said, and I share your same point of view, and that's why I brought the bill. And that is because we believe, our philosophy here has been that care can be best provided for people, whether it's the disabled community or those suffering from addiction, best provided for in the community. This bill does not propose to defund anybody. I was given the honor of some new assignment upstairs, which I'm still learning about, and we are going to be working on making sure needs are met and the monies are properly placed where the needs are. What this says is, let's take stock of what programs we have going on now in the CSB, and if there's any way we can do it better, then you can do it better for less, and that money can still go to treatment of people in communities. So in terms of your philosophy, ours here in this committee and the General Assembly, that treatment should be provided for in the community, this bill fits squarely in that spirit. So I appreciate what you're saying, Delegate. I think that you would be just as happy with this bill as you have been with others in terms of whether people are having their needs met, whether people are getting good services, and in terms of addiction and recovery, they're on the right path. And that, I mean, this gentleman I've known, he and others are completely committed to seeing people rehabilitate themselves and live the life they were intended to live. And I think the government shouldn't necessarily be the only purveyor of those services.
Mr. Chairman. Delegate. Mr. Chairman, I like the idea of the grant program very much, and I think that it can be a very effective way to create essentially what is a kind of a public-private partnership where we're supporting, groups like this to provide these services. And I agree that there's a role for non-governmental entities in this that can be very important. My concern is the piece where we find money by essentially we find money basically in the community services boards. So I wonder if there's a way that we could move this bill forward by removing the funding mechanism that involves auditing and taking money from the community services boards that would still create the grant program. And there are a number of ways to get money into a grant program, and one way might be on the ninth floor to appropriate some money into the grant program.
I Mr. Chairman, I hear that before the committee, and I think that may be friendly, I gotta think about her. Yeah, I appreciate it. If I can indulge the committee, Mr. Chairman, I think I've talked long enough. I would like John to have an opportunity to just speak briefly about his program and sort of the deficiencies that he may see in the field and why this parity is necessary.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm John Shinholz. I'm a person of long-term recovery from substance abuse disorders. For me, that means I've been clean and sober almost 30 years, a little over 29 years. And I've been very involved in the recovery community for 29 plus years, to include in and out of Department of Corrections prisons and jails, delivering recovery support services to the inmates that suffer from addiction. Now, what we're really talking about is a fundamental shift in the systemic problem. Our current system of care delivers what is known as substance abuse services. Emerging all over the United States is what we call recovery support services. Recovery support services are scientific, evidence-based practices that have proven to be superior than substance abuse services, which basically means you deliver more services for less money and get a better outcome. Currently, our system of care is going backwards. If you'll notice before you, in the year 2006, they spent, CSB 2007 spent $140 million and served 53,000 plus consumers. In 2010, they spent $7 million more and served 14,000 less people, or 15,000 less people. So the more money we spend, is the less people we serve. Now, we have $147 million in a delivery system, and not all of it is being spent wisely. I've spent 10 years advocating on behalf of the community service boards for necessary funding. I am their friend. I am their ally. In 2005, the community service board printed us up in their annual report as the darling and the savior of our system of care. Now, along the process, I pointed out to the community service board folks, hey, look, these are some areas you're not very efficient in, you're not very effective in, and you're going down a rabbit hole you're not going to be able to get out, especially the recovery-oriented system of care, which is emerging nationally as the next coming of services for the addicted folks. And they don't like, our current agencies and funders do not like outside suggestions, outside services. They want to keep everything in-house, where they continue to not only make the rules and regulations on who gets the money and how it's spent, but they actually come up with mechanisms to keep the most effective providers out of the game of the funds. We have an existing bill that is already a law. We're just coming along asking to tweak it a little bit, make it so that a real authentic group of stakeholders from around the state who are doing the majority of the services as we speak, and yet getting out of the money or very little of it. We want a voice in the commissioner's office as a stakeholder group, and let us, I know exactly where some money is in some of these regions that they're not spending that would be effective. In today's paper alone, on the front page, is one of our stakeholders, Boaz and Ruth. They did a nice article. It demonstrated how they brought $6 million back to the community running their nonprofit agency. It's a nice front page article. Today I have with me 4 of our clients. Robert here is a Vietnam Marine Corps veteran that was turned out of an emergency room psych ward on the street. No CSB was here to help this man. Now he's in my organization. We won't keep till we find an appropriate place for him. We got a guy coming in from Kentucky because he couldn't get served in Kentucky, and another young lady that the CSB won't help because the wait time is 25 days. Our CSBs are not getting a job done. These recovery community organizations like the McShin Foundation, OEI in Southwest Virginia, Meridian in Northern Virginia, we're getting the job done. We're open 7 days a week. We don't have security guards keeping people out. We're getting it done. We are the best unutilized resource the state has.
Mr. Chairman. I have a question for Mr. Shen.
Yes, sir.
How much money do you get annually from the community services board?
We have one community service board out of 40 that reimburses us annually, only if they have money left over, and in the last 7 years, it's been anywhere from $4,000 to $21,000.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chairman? Is that because of the state funding for substance abuse services is so low? Or is that because the community services board is not
There's
money.
an area of ineffectiveness in the CSBs. There's an area of ineffectiveness in the CSBs. They have some pockets of money they could utilize for this purpose if they chose to, but they're so caught up in not getting increase in living and all that stuff, and notice that they cut services every year. You know, we're strangling our CSBs, so this is two issues here. Strangulation of CSBs, but at the same time, they're not utilizing a portion of their dollars wisely. Does that answer your question?
Mr. Chairman,
Delegate,
I guess my problem is that I used to chair the Arlington Community Services Board for about 8 years. And what you just said, it may be one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. Because that's not the case in Arlington. And I can't speak for every CSB, but I will tell you the money that they do spend is they do spend wisely. They don't get a whole lot of funding from the state government. And what they do, a lot of it for substance abuse services comes from local dollars. There's not a whole lot of local support. Now, I would say, since Delegate Peace is on the Appropriations Committee, I do think you should focus your energies on getting more funding from the state to apply for substance abuse. And I think what Delegate Peace is doing in this bill is a very good start. I want to second the motion by Delegate England to strike the auditing provision, because I think we should start advocating for more state dollars, and you'll see more programs that will flow to the nonprofits. We have in Arlington County Phoenix Houses, which does a tremendous job. I actually happen to sit on that board, which does a tremendous job in providing substance abuse services, and I tend to agree with you that we need to rely on our nonprofits, but I believe the CSBs do rely on their nonprofits to provide the services. So I would second Delegate England's motion, and we'll hope that the committee can adopt it.
Mr. Chairman, can I speak to the motion?
let's just figure out our procedure. Right now, in the bill before us, there's been a motion made in second. Right, I understand. Second on that. What are the lines?
And I think that it's.
Lines, Mr. Chairman, 95.
95 on.
So just so again, we'll talk about it, but the motion on the table, the motion before us is to strike lines 95 through 135, which would be to strike the section with the audit which was described. All right, does everybody understand the motion? Okay, Delegate Peace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate all the comments that have been made. As you can see, this is a difficult subject matter because there are people who are out there who are in need and suffering from addiction, and we've got to figure out the best way to get to them and help them. I think that this committee's purpose, as I've served on it, is primarily related to the policy issues, and not so much how much CSB is funded or whether it's underfunded. And all of those may be very legitimate concerns, and I think that's sort of a separate subject matter. As you heard Mr. Shinholzer say, they do get reimbursed out of a residual from some savings that may be found in the department. That, in some ways, is very much like what we were proposing in the audit concept, or whatever savings could be accrued to the program generally, that those would fund the grant program. Regardless, I think that the motion is friendly, and it does separate the money discussion from the policy discussion, and there certainly could be, as the budgets for CSB are debated through the process, ways to address those funding issues. So, thank you.
All right, so I've sat here for 10 years, longer than anybody else up here, I'm sorry, and would this not be better, and maybe you obviously brought this before you knew you were on appropriations, but this all seems like an appropriations issue rather than a HWI issue. What I'm getting at would be, this is what we do with budget amendments. You have budget amendments that look at stuff and how much we spend and what we don't do, and none of us are up there except, I'm just thinking that perhaps this really should, the whole thing should be up there.
Mr. Chairman,
and they might not do it as a bill, they might do it as an amendment or something, that
Well,
they do it all the time.
and I'm Mr. Chairman, just learning a lot of that stuff, but yes, to answer your question. However, I will say that this committee should not see it as authority to act on the policy matters which are related to the grant program itself. Is this a good concept? and we work out the money piece separately upstairs. So if the committee's will would be to recommend reporting and referring, I think that's probably fine. It'll give me something to do up there.
Let's share sequentially. So there's a motion on the table, the patron has said he finds it friendly. Any more debate on the motion, which is to remove the auditing section and just create the grant program? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, no's raise your hand. Okay, and that the measure passes. So,
Well, I think it's 4-3. You're good. You're good.
okay.
Point of order.
Yes,
What posture were we just passed Delegate England's amendment?
we just did.
Now, let me ask the subcommittee chair, does this committee create grants or funds that are unfunded?
I don't think we cannot. I'm not aware of any prohibition about that.
We don't shy away from that. I
I'm
just
sure
struck
different
it as
issues. Shy away is different, but I'm not aware that any has done it before.
No, I know we've done it before,
That's what I think we
but I have a couple bill ideas.
I think we
That
have
come to
the
my head
authority,
right now.
we have the authority to do it.
Okay,
It is not something we've done routinely.
okay.
And, kind of this issue about what's properly in the HWI, what's properly before appropriations is already, that's sort of an open question.
Mr. Chairman, is there a letter on this bill, may I ask? Do you have any direction from appropriations on this bill?
I have not received a letter, but that usually goes to the chair, not myself, so it might be that it gets something.
Can I ask one more question?
Delegate Crockett Star.
How many nonprofit agencies do you have in mind that are going to apply for this grant? How is it going to spread money to them for anyone to do?
Mr. Chairman, Delegate asks a good question. The bill establishes the grant fund and a RFP process, just like any other competitive bidding. We need to make sure the money's going to organizations that are good and providing good services. I can just list for you. There are some eligible organizations previously mentioned, Boaz and Ruth. I mentioned the Healing Place, McShin, Occupational Enterprise Incorporated, Edge Hill Recovery Center, His Ministries, which is a faith-based organization, Sober House, Unfunded Sarah, Virginia affiliates, others to be identified. So there are quite a few that may be eligible. They may not all apply, but we just don't know. We want to give them an opportunity.
No, absent the audit piece, there is no funding stream for this unless the appropriations creates one. Is that fair?
That's right.
Okay. Sometimes we see, or we hope for private money to create something.
Well, actually, you're right in part. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for asking that, because it does say the department shall allocate all donations and contributions to the grant. So, we could, much like Delegate Massey's bill out there on education, you could have corporate entities, you could have others, private individuals, people bequesting.
Right. What I thought though would be, I thought of that, and I said, but they'll probably just give right to the McShin Foundation. In other words, if they won't have to, if you're a private entity who wants to help this process and you have if you're a donor and you've got a process, I'm not sure we need, I guess what I'm leading up to would be, it seems that, we have to talk about appropriations, it seems like if we like this as a general idea, we still should send it up to appropriations, because after the audit, not have any realistic hope that there will be private donors.
That's correct.
And I don't think there is much hope for that, because again, it's not that they won't give, they'll give directly to you, they won't have to go through the department, to have a bill, to have a grant, to have a this, they'll just find one.
Mr. Chairman, if I might also just, I'm thinking of, say, the community foundation model, okay? You have a great one in your.
I'm just wondering whether we should send it up to appropriations, what I mean, I think the answer is yes, but I
think it's in the will of the subcommittee in terms of its recommendation, but in terms of what you said about donor intent, some people may say, I want to give to recovery support services. I don't know if I have a favorite. I like a lot of these. They're all doing good work. And so much like the Community Foundation has a number of donor advised funds and other things, they'll give to the Community Foundation so the Community Foundation's wisdom can give it out. I think that's kind of the model, and so we want to keep CSB in the picture here because they do provide some good service.
We're running out of time, and that's mostly my fault. So
Thank you for the time that you.
let's see if there's any member of the public, and then let's take whatever action we take. Does that make sense? Okay, any member of the public or the department or agency like to be heard on this measure? And again, we have stripped out the auditing section, and it leaves the grant process in place. Okay. My suggestion would be that we report and refer up to appropriations. I think absent that, we're creating a whole bunch of code without perhaps if there's no money at all, then I'm not sure that we want to keep doing that. We could always just do it next year if we have money. But
Mr. Chairman?
Delegate Crutchfield is in just a second. Delegate Crutchfield.
This is just a statement, and to the gentleman who spoke, I too served on the CSB board for 13 years, and some of the things, statements that you made concerns me somewhat. It was an opinion you gave in areas of ineffectiveness, and that's why I would think an audit would need to prove whether that was your opinion or a fact that could be backed up. And actually, I think that CSB boards should have an opportunity, if this goes forward, to speak where you think their areas of ineffectiveness are, to explain where they are or not. I felt like that we downed a group that we fund and expect to take care of our people without giving anyone here having the opportunity to speak in defense of themselves, and to say that they're not utilizing what they have and all bothered me to hear it said. I'm sorry to be so wordy. Thank you.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say, I totally appreciate what Delegate Crutchfield is saying, and my original statement in terms of posture of this bill was not to disparage any particular group, but to create some parity and give opportunities.
Okay, we're running out of time. Everybody's got caucus at 11:30, so Delegate Hope, and then let's go ahead and take action.
My one question for Delegate Peace is under the language that we have now, could CSBs apply for the grant funding?
You know, it's a good question. I don't think there's anything in the language that would preclude that, but, you know, that's not the intent either. That could be answered through the development of the RFP process, whether the working group develops that and addresses it.
Okay, members of the subcommittee, this is our last bill. We're actually doing okay on time, but we need to take some action. So what is the pleasure of the subcommittee on the bill as amended? Okay, there's been a motion made to report and refer it up to appropriations. All second. Any debate? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
All right, nays, raise your hand. Okay.
Thank you all very much.
I would come to, for your info. I'd say I'd come to full credit because you're.
Yeah,
I'll be there. You're there. Subcommittee, thank you for your attention. Now, in terms of schedule.